Hey guys, so it's been a while since I've done one of these videos, and I was thinking about something and I wanted to share my thoughts. This really isn't about politics. It pulls in politics, but I'm not looking to get into a debate about politics. I want to talk about labor and wages in the stock market and a little bit of analysis on what's currently happening in our world. A little food for thought. Um, and just see if you ever thought about things this way. So first off, with wages, something incredible is happening right now where wages are booming across the board for semi-skilled and non-skilled labor. Booming. And when I say booming, I don't mean 50 cents an hour or a dollar an hour. I mean 20, 30, 40% increases in hourly wage. Companies going from paying 11, 12 bucks an hour to 15, 16, 17, 18. Really large companies right now are paying 21, 22, $23 an hour. And I'm talking about unskilled labor positions, where you're literally loading and unloading trucks, or you're, assembling small parts, or assembling picture frames, or assembling furniture, really light general labor stuff. And if you want to verify, go on Indeed.com and do a search for general labor in your area. Um, I live in Lake County, so do that search, general area, and verify what I'm saying. Wages are booming across the board, um, which is really good for America. But I was looking at some data maybe last week, and it was interesting. Donald Trump talks all the time about, and again, I'm not talking politics, but he's the president. He's the one talking about it. But he talks all the time about how great the stock market is doing, and people say, people on the other side say that that's his only measure, and it goes back and forth. But it's actually not true. It's actually not true that. So the stock market, at least in terms of growth, actually grew at a higher rate during the Obama administration than it has grown in the first Trump administration. And yeah, and maybe part of that's COVID pulling it down a little bit, but it's not even close. I mean, I think I want to say there's like 3 or 4 points of separation, which when you're talking about 15, 16% growth, that's a big difference. Three points is that's a big difference. Um, you know, what 25% difference. So it's and what's interesting is Donald Trump. If you look at presidents of my lifetime, at least Donald Trump isn't. He's toward the bottom. I mean, he's second to last. If you really rank it out, Bill Clinton had the biggest, strongest growth numbers of my lifetime. Barack Obama would be second, actually, with Reagan third, H.W. Bush fourth, um, Trump fifth, and then W sixth. And I mean, I would argue that W being sixth has a lot more to do with 9/11 and consumer confidence and foreign wars and things of that nature versus policy. But either way, that's if you rank it out, that's the way it goes. Clinton, Obama, Reagan, Bush one, Trump, Bush two. So Trump is 5 out of 6. And if you listen carefully, the top two were the only two Democrats. So the only two Democrats that have been, well, 2 out of 4 in my lifetime. And the stock market performed better under Democrats than under Republicans, and I find that interesting because trendy thought is that Republicans do better for the stock market, things like that. So I thought that was really interesting. So here's the rub: is that the stock market growing like that is not necessarily good for American labor, for the American worker. And that's the really interesting thing, is that the Democrat Party is supposed to be, the Labor Party, the party of workers, and the Republicans are supposed to be, big money, rich fat cats, things like that. But when you really look at the data, it doesn't hold up. Um, because the thing is when the stock market grows, that's a good measure of how America as a whole is doing, just in terms of GDP, and in terms of how profitable companies are. But even with that, it doesn't necessarily paint the picture of who is making the money, right? Because it's not everybody. Not everybody's in the market, and your average Joe and Sally who have their 401k, they're not. Even people with high 6 or 7, even 8 figure 401ks, they're not they're not doing that much damage in the stock market. They're not really moving numbers. The people who are moving numbers are speculators. These huge hedge funds, these huge private equity firms. That's who's really moving the needle and causing the up and down. Um, that's why. So when you see that a particular party, the stock market performs better, it's not necessarily good for labor, and I'll tell you why. So I'll tell you why. Um, if you're a private equity firm and China gives you $1.5 billion, Russia gives you, whatever. So you're basically going to take that debt and you're going to use it to try to make money in the American market. And you're going to do it by buying companies that are, if you're a private equity firm, you're going to look to buy companies that are either undervalued or underperforming, and that you think that you can fix and flip at a profit. That's basically the goal. So what happens, these huge private equity companies, let's talk manufacturing. They'll go in, they'll see a company that's underperforming, and they'll buy this company, and their goal is to buy it with the intent of flipping it at a profit. How do you do that? Well, the easiest way to improve the valuation is to improve the profitability, right? And there's two ways basically to improve profitability. You either are increasing revenue or you're decreasing costs. One or the other. Either way, your bottom line gets better, you increase your profit margins, right? Well, the faster way is to cut costs, because to create growth, you have to do things, whether it's selling, marketing, creating new products. You have to do things to create growth. You don't necessarily have to do anything to cut costs. You could just simply stop doing things, or you could, there's ways to cut costs that you can do now, right now. And if you think about the largest one single cost for a lot of companies, that falls into labor, where your labor, especially in a manufacturing company, you're anywhere from 20 to 30% of your total costs. So if you can carve out a chunk of that, your profitability goes up instantly. You can raise it 5, 10, 15% now. So how do you do that? Well, how do you reduce labor costs? You either fire people or you reduce wages, right? So, so what's the simplest way to reduce wages? And if you think about this, the simplest way is to if you're a manufacturer, the simplest way is if your people are making 14, 15, 16 bucks an hour, and there's people in China who are willing to do the same job for 50 cents, $1 an hour, if that, right? So you're instantly cutting labor costs by almost 100%. And if you're a huge manufacturing company where the bulk of your labor is either on your manufacturing floor or in shipping and receiving, or in your warehouse, then you can literally cut 20, 25, 30% of your costs and increase your profitability 20, 25, 30% overnight. And what you did was you just shipped those jobs from America to China, right? Or to Mexico or wherever. So these private equity companies, they come in, they buy the company, they want to make it immediately more profitable. How do you do it? You ship the job, right? Outsource it. Well, right now, why are wages, to connect it back to what I originally said, why are wages skyrocketing in America right now? I'll tell you why. Because right now, you don't, the cost to ship a job to China and the cost to do it in America is almost the same now, because of all the tariffs on China and some other reasons, all the tariffs on Mexico. There's other factors, but those are major factors of why wages are going up right now, because it's much more expensive to outsource the job to China, to Mexico, anywhere else. It's much more expensive. So the cost to do it in America compared to outsourcing is pretty similar right now. It's almost even for a lot of companies. And and nowadays, when you slap that "Made in the USA" label, your sales go up, and they typically make up for whatever the difference in cost is. So it's you're heavily incentivized to keep your labor force here. And then with Corona and people being on unemployment and them getting the extra money on unemployment, people are legitimately making 15, 16 bucks an hour to stay home on unemployment. So the only way these companies are going to get this unskilled labor to come out is to pay them 15, 16, 17, $18 an hour. So wages are just booming right now because, one, it's way too expensive to outsource it to China or to Mexico. And two, in order to get these people back in the labor market, you got to pay them. And when you look at another alternative, there's the alternative of illegal, undocumented labor, right? So if somebody's undocumented, even though the minimum wage, right now in Lake County, I think it's $10. Somebody undocumented might do that job for $7 or $8 an hour. And now you have companies who are incentivized to hire that undocumented labor or outsource it to China or find ways to eliminate the labor costs, right? And for these huge private equity companies, that's the first thing they try to do. So with the borders closed, with the stop on all immigration right now, that plus the tariffs on China, plus the tariffs on Mexico, plus the unemployment and the extra money from Corona, right? And that's why it was a big deal that I'm going to sign an executive order to get you next to 300 and let your state match it for 300. So all of these things happening right now, and wages are just boom, 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 exploding, exploding, exploding. And these huge companies who have the resources are realizing, hey, all our competitors can't necessarily afford to compete with us on labor. So they're paying 21, 22, 23 bucks an hour for people to come back to work right now. And it's working. And it's forcing small companies, smaller manufacturers, what choice do they have? They either have to close their doors or they have to raise wages to compete. And if they can't, they have to, right? Or they have to close their doors. And so they'll find some way to make up for the money. Maybe it's in pricing, maybe it's another place, but they have no choice. It's either we increase our wages or we go out of business. So they're doing it. Wages are just booming. So, if you look at, and I don't want to tie it into politics. That's why I pause like that, because I don't want to tie it into politics. But the thing is if you reopen the borders, you take off the tariffs on China, you take off the tariffs on Mexico, you institute a $15 minimum wage. Now companies have all this incentive to just go ahead and ship the job. Ship it, boom, send it to China, send it to Mexico. And now these people who right now are making the 15, 16, 17 bucks an hour, well, guess what? Those jobs don't exist anymore. And now right now, there's so many more jobs than people. There's so many more jobs. Everybody needs employees and nobody wants to work, partly because, they're making 15, 16 bucks an hour at home. So right now, there's so many more jobs than people. And if you allow these companies, especially, the private equity companies, to outsource and buy and flip, right? That's the other thing to tie it back to, is that I don't even know if it's really connected, right? But when Wall Street is doing really well, right, because private equity companies are able to buy these companies, increase the profitability, drive up the stock price, sell it. The better the stock market is doing, that's who's winning, is those private equity companies, the hedge fund companies. And if we do all of those things, eliminate the tariffs, open the borders, institute the $15 minimum wage. Now those companies are incentivized to right now they're paying American workers. They're incentivized to take those jobs, ship them to China, decrease the labor costs, increase the profitability, and flip it at a profit. And the stock market will do really, really, really well because those guys will buy every manufacturing company in America. I'm sorry, those people, right? Will buy every manufacturing company in America. They'll outsource the labor, and they'll flip them. And what you'll see is private equity companies making tons and tons of money, and American jobs being shipped overseas. And that's what we had for, from what that's listen. That's what we had from 2008 to 2016. If you're honest about it, that's how we lost 160,000 jobs. That's how they all ended up in China and in Mexico. And so that is my take on wages, on the stock market, and on when the stock market is really doing well, the American worker typically isn't. And I am trying so hard to not tie in politics, but when you look at who's in power when the stock market's doing really well and who's in power when American workers and American wages are doing really well, that helps me tremendously in being able to make decisions right now at election time as far as what I believe in. And I don't want to, but I wanted to share those thoughts about wages, about American workers, about what's really good for them, about the stock market, and all that information that's kind of misleading. So yeah, if you got thoughts, let me know. See you.